This is the second module of the Six Sigma Day, Module 2B. So selection of our project is very important. We've got the right people on the team. We know the differences between a white belt, yellow belt, green belt, and black belt. We saw that in our white belt training. If you have any questions about that, simply go back and watch the white belt videos. The projects now that we want to work on, there's different ways to approach the different projects. Sometimes it's just a matter of putting a small group of people together, 2 or 3 people, and solving a problem very quickly using a Kaizen type event. There's other times where we need a larger team and we need to be able to really understand what's happening within our area, and we're going to have to follow a more conventional problem-solving methodology, such as following our DMAIC problem-solving methodology. So we're going to see that in later on in this particular module as well. We're going to see the beginning portions of that. But how do we understand what projects to work on and what's more important than another? What we do is we put together something of a matrix. So what we're going to do is we're going to identify what's important to our particular projects and our particular organization. So is it something that is important to the customer? If it is, we're going to give it a score relative to 5, a higher number. If it has no direct benefit to the customer, we're going to score that 0. So this matrix that you see here is just an example of some of the things that we would say is relatively important to our particular project. So cost reduction, is it going to save us a lot of money, or is it going to cost the cost savings are really going to be minimal, and in that case we'll rank it down close to 0 or a 1. Is it something that's causing us a lot of scrap or rework? Quality improvement to this particular problem that we see. If it's high on that list, we'll maybe rank it up 3, 4, 5. If it's lower, we'll rank it a 1 or 0. These rankings that are within these boxes, these are totally arbitrary. These are things that you can come up with on your own as a group, as an organization, to rank the projects that you need to consider working on. All we're trying to do here is show you that there is a way to rank the projects so that later on you can decide which ones are going to have the greatest amount of impact for. The time and size of the project, if it's something that is going to happen very quickly, maybe that's something that we should consider. If it's something that's going to take a year or so, very long time, maybe that's something that we don't necessarily want to work on right now. So we'll rank that a little bit lower. Based on the technical expertise, is it something that we have within the existing department, or are we going to have to bring in some heavy guns, some outside consultants perhaps, or put together a specialized team? Again, any one of these particular criteria that you decide is important for your team, you come up with your own ranking. The lower number is the less desirable. The higher number is things that are going to be more beneficial to the organization. So a customer project that's going to keep a customer around, satisfy a customer, obviously that's important. If we're going to save a lot of money, that's important. If we're reducing quality issues, that's important. If it's something that we can do very quickly, then that's something that should affect this. And certainly if it's something that we can do within the expertise level of the individuals within our organization, then that's another reason to do this, to work on this project. So you have a list of 10 or so projects. You're going to then put a rank for each one of these relative to each of those projects, and then come up with a total score of either adding or multiplying these across. Your decision. If you're using zeros for any of your criteria, you can't multiply, you have to add. If your lowest number is a 1, then you certainly can multiply across 2. Usually when we multiply it, it shows a wider range of finished numbers. where you could be multiplying a 5 times a 5 times a 3 times a 3 times a 6 and get a significantly different number than had you added those numbers and compared them across. So your decision there, this is simply a matrix that's going to help you achieve the rankings that you need to prioritize your projects. Now when you're all done, that doesn't mean project number 7 on your list from the top down is not the one you're going to select because you're going to lose a customer over it. But relative terms as to how quick or how beneficial a project will be versus the pain that it's going to take to solve that problem, that's basically what this matrix is going to give you and help you with. We have provided a project selection tool for you with some additional columns here for the total and the project name for you to go off and fill out. If you have any questions, certainly email us. But the thought here would be for you to get together with a couple managers, a couple individuals, and actually complete this. You can do this individually too as you learn the tool. Now we're going to talk about the DMAIC process. The DMAIC methodology is a problem-solving methodology to be followed when you have an existing process. So we're looking to enhance an existing process. Basically, as we go through our DMAIC process, and you can see on the left here, we have our define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. During the define stage, we're trying to identify all the different inputs to our process. So as we look at those inputs, we may have 30, 40, 50 or so of these inputs. We want to go through and start to narrow those down. We know we can't control 50 of them. We want to find out which are the most critical ones, which are the ones that are affecting my output the most. And we're going to come down and we're going to find those critical 3 to 6 items. And those are going to be the ones that we're going to want to have the most controls over or the best controls over. That doesn't mean that we're going to totally ignore all the others. We're simply going to put more emphasis on the ones that are most important. In the process control module, we're going to talk about a Pareto. And if you can relate this to a Pareto, what we're really trying to do is rank the different inputs relative to the importance of the project. And again, when we're all done, we want to have the most controls and we want to emphasize most of our work on the ones that are the most significant. And we want to ignore or at least not have as much distractions on the ones that are what we consider the insignificant many items. So during the define process, this is when we've assigned a project to a particular belt, whether it's a green belt or a black belt. Some yellow belts that also have or that have some facilitating experience may be assigned projects. That's not very common. Depending on your organization, it may or may not be common. We also want to select a team at that point. Who's going to be on the team? There may be a core group of 4 or 5 people on the team, and then we may have some other team members that may be coming in and out of that team as the project goes and develops. I don't recommend that you go through your project constantly changing your team. You want to have continuity. You don't want people coming in, especially with a Kaizen event. I've had people say to me, I can't be there for the 3-day Kaizen event, but I'll be there for the first day, or I'll be there for day 2 or whatever. As much as it's always nice to have additional assistance, the last thing you want to have is people coming in and out of your team. It messes with the team dynamics, and it's not something that I recommend. I had a particular supplier. This woman had been in probably more laboratories than anybody else I'd known, and she had said to me she couldn't make it for all 3 days, but she'd be willing to help out for one. Had the same conversation with her that I just mentioned, and she went back, readjusted her schedule, came in for the 3 days. She was a huge asset to the team, and then at the same time, afterwards, she actually thanked me for selecting her to be part of the team and asking her to be on the team. And she absolutely understood why. Firsthand, she understood why she needed to be there for all 3 days, and the team really benefited from it. So it was a win all around. And so some of the other things that we're trying to do during this define stage is we're identifying some of the boundaries. What actually is the project that we're working on? What are we trying to solve here? That should have been conveyed by the management team, but we need to understand that completely as we develop our project charter. So project charter is going to include a number of different pieces of information, including the scope of the project, what process it actually affects. We're not here to solve world hunger. We're not here to boil the ocean. We're here to solve a small problem or a large problem to the company, say, but relative to saving the world, we can't do that. We're going to work on a small project. We need to define that. So we're not going to solve all the problems in the company. We're never going to get there. So we need to define this clearly. Where are we working on this project? What's the scope of it? Make sure it's narrow. Make sure that there are measurables in place. What are we doing? Where are we starting? We need to identify what those metrics are. During the measure phase of the process, we'll actually establish the baseline, but for right now, we need to know what are we going to do to measure this process. Are we going to measure it in dollars of inventory? Are we going to measure it on quality yields? Are we measuring this on employee turnover? What's the criteria? Perhaps it's lead time, and it takes us X amount of days or X amount of hours to process something through our areas. We need to know what that metric is. Some of the things that we're going to talk about here and put on our charter need to be clearly defined. Okay, so relative to a project scope and a statement here, this is just an example. Defects from the machining area have hit an all-time high and are causing major problems relative to rework, scrap, and late deliveries to the customer. This project will focus on reduction of defects from the machining department. Now we've narrowed this down to the machining department and the reduction of defects. If this project starts to work on throughput issues, or they start to work on areas outside the machining department, they've creeped, their scope has creeped. They're starting to solve things that are outside what we're asking them to do. So from an accountability standpoint, the manager, he or she is going to come and look at what's happening with this team. This is going to help them bring that team back in line if they decide to start solving other problems. Some of the goals, referring back to the machining project, if we're going to look at reduction of quality issues, then where are we starting now? Do we want to reduce them by 50%, 20%? Here are some other ones. These are nice quantifiable numbers. We want to drop our inventory by 500K. That's a good solid number. Reduction of travel time by 25%. Okay, that's good. These are solid numbers. These are goals that we're going to want to have established prior to moving beyond the define stage. These should normally come from the management team that's assigned it, although it's not uncommon for teams to go back and challenge this because we don't want to have unrealistic goals. Again, keep your goals SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, reaching, and timed. Okay, so again, it's great to say we're going to reduce our defects by 90%, but if that's not attainable, then that doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, to reduce them by 5%, that may be attainable, but is that really reaching for us? We want them out there quite a bit. The timed is important as well because, and none of these examples show the time, but an example would be the first one: reduce turning defects by 35% within the next 6 months, or within the next 4 months, or whatever your timed example would be. So when you set your goals and objectives, make sure you're following and using this nice SMART acronym. So the project and charter is going to have those goals and milestones. Any additional support needed or resources that you may identify would be listed there at number 9. Okay, so here's some additional information to fill out on your project charter. If you've got any belts mentoring, it doesn't necessarily have to be a black belt. There may be a green belt mentor or a senior engineer that hasn't attained a higher level belt status. Certainly, there's a lot of people out there with some terrific skills. Fill them in as appropriate and identify the team members as well. So now that you have an idea as to how to complete the charter, what I would like you to do is take this time and actually complete a project charter and try to fill something out. It doesn't have to be a real project. It can be something that you've made up, but there is a copy of a project charter, and you can go ahead and actually try to complete that at this time.